Police! Turn the truck off! Turn the truck off! Lincoln 5, high risk stop. The exact numerics are going to be 2580 Graph South. The car. Step out of the car right now. Step out. Step out. Look at me. Step out. Step out. Go down to your stomach. Down to your stomach right now. Down to your stomach. Down to your stomach. Go down to your stomach right now or I will tase you. Go down to your stomach right now. Lincoln 5, taser deployed. Stay on the ground.
On the afternoon of July 24th, 2024, what initially appeared to be another routine report of a reckless driver would soon unfold into one of the most controversial police encounters in Sebastopol, California. Emergency dispatchers received multiple calls reporting a pickup truck swerving dangerously across the roadway. Witnesses believed the driver was intoxicated, describing a vehicle that repeatedly drifted across traffic lanes and created a serious risk to everyone around it. Based on the information available at the time, officers believed they were responding to a potentially dangerous drunk driving incident that required immediate intervention. The driver behind the wheel was Jeffrey Callahan, a father who was traveling with his 6-year-old daughter. Unknown to anyone witnessing the incident, Callahan was not impaired by alcohol or drugs. Instead, he was living with type 1 diabetes, a lifelong medical condition that requires constant monitoring of blood sugar levels. To help manage his condition, Callahan relied on a continuous glucose monitoring device designed to alert him whenever his blood sugar reached dangerously low levels. Under normal circumstances, the device would send an immediate warning to his phone, giving him enough time to treat the episode before it became life-threatening. But on this particular afternoon, everything went wrong. For reasons that would later become central to the case, the monitoring device failed to issue any warning. As Callahan continued driving, his blood sugar dropped to a critically dangerous level without his knowledge. The gradual loss of glucose began affecting his brain function, impairing his awareness, slowing his reactions, and preventing him from recognizing what was happening around him. Meanwhile, officers responding to the emergency calls had no way of knowing any of this. From their perspective, they were following a driver who had failed to maintain his lane, ignored emergency lights, and continued driving despite repeated attempts to stop him.
They're online now.
40.
Copy, TC at 2400 Graph.
Lincoln 5, TC, across from Antique Society, start code 3 medics.
Copy.
Police! Turn the truck off! Turn the truck off! Lincoln 5, high risk stop. The exact numerics are going to be 2580 Graph South. The car. Step out of the car right now. Step out. Step out. Look at me. Step out. Step out. Go down to your stomach. Down to your stomach right now. Down to your stomach. Down to your stomach. Go down to your stomach right now or I will tase you. Go down to your stomach right now. Lincoln 5, taser deployed. Stay on the ground.
Every observation seemed consistent with someone attempting to evade police or driving under the influence. Officer Forrest Whitehall of the Sebastopol Police Department located the pickup truck, stopped at a red light, and activated his emergency lights to initiate a traffic stop. Surprisingly, the driver showed no response whatsoever. Instead of pulling over, the truck continued moving. What followed was not a high-speed pursuit, but a slow and confusing chase that lasted several minutes. Traveling at speeds between 20 and 40 miles per hour, the vehicle continued out of town while officers attempted to gain the driver's attention. As the pursuit continued, the truck gradually drifted farther off course until it eventually left the roadway altogether, crashing into a roadside ditch. To the officers on scene, this appeared to confirm their suspicions that the driver was severely impaired. What they did not yet realize was that Jeffrey Callahan was not trying to flee police at all. According to the facts that would later emerge, he was suffering from a severe hypoglycemic episode caused by critically low blood sugar, a medical emergency capable of producing confusion, delayed reactions, impaired judgment, and even unconsciousness. Within moments of the crash, officers surrounded the disabled truck. Everything that happened next, from the officer's tactical response to the repeated use of force, the criminal investigation, and ultimately a multi-million-dollar legal settlement, was captured on police body camera footage. The encounter would later become the subject of intense legal scrutiny, a federal civil rights lawsuit, and widespread public debate over how law enforcement should respond when a medical emergency is mistaken for criminal behavior.
The car. Step out of the car right now. Step out. Step out. Look at me. Step out. Step out. Go down to your stomach. Down to your stomach right now. Down to your stomach. Down to your stomach. Go down to your stomach right now or I will tase you. Go down to your stomach right now. Lincoln 5, taser deployed. Stay on the ground. Stay down. Stay down. Get on your stomach. Roll over on your stomach right now. Roll over. Get on your stomach. I will keep tasing you. Stay on your...
As officers approached the crashed pickup truck, they had only seconds to assess what they believed was a highly dangerous situation. From their perspective, they had just pursued a driver who had ignored emergency lights, failed to stop, and ultimately crashed into a ditch. With limited information and no way of knowing what had caused the driver's behavior, Officer Forrest Whitehall approached the vehicle with his firearm drawn, treating the encounter as a high-risk stop. The officer repeatedly ordered Jeffrey Callahan to turn off the truck and step out of the vehicle. Although Callahan eventually exited, his behavior immediately raised concerns. He appeared confused, disoriented, and slow to respond to commands. Instead of quickly complying with instructions, he struggled to understand what officers were asking him to do. Believing the situation required immediate control, Officer Whitehall repeatedly ordered Callahan to get down onto his stomach. Despite standing with his hands raised and making no aggressive movements, Callahan failed to comply with those commands. Officers interpreted his lack of response as resistance rather than recognizing that he might be suffering from a medical emergency. Within moments, Officer Whitehall deployed his taser. Even after the first deployment, Callahan still appeared unable to understand what was happening around him. Additional taser deployments followed as officers continued attempting to force him into compliance. Throughout the encounter, there was no visible weapon, no attempt to attack officers, and no effort to flee the scene. Instead, Callahan remained confused and physically incapable of responding in the manner officers expected. Only after the scene had been secured did the situation begin to change. Medical personnel evaluated Callahan and administered sugar, allowing his blood glucose level to recover. As his condition gradually improved, his awareness returned, and he began speaking coherently with officers for the first time since the incident. Callahan explained that he was a type 1 diabetic and had no memory of much of what had just occurred. He told officers that once he received sugar, his mind finally began working again. Before that, he said he had absolutely no idea what was happening or why he had been stopped. He recalled feeling completely confused and unable to process the events around him. Despite everything he had just experienced, Callahan's first concern was not himself.
Explore the child custody thing.
Yeah.
Find out, run a 26 on him, and then I'll provide her the mom's information and see if we can find that court order. Okay. And see if it says that he's not supposed to have it. There's a arrest for that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we're going to have to sit with him. Now, nobody has told him he's under arrest yet. No. Has he been Mirandized?
He's been Mirandized and he didn't answer my question.
Okay. So, did you ask him any of the FST stuff?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so be advised, the review units can come in a little early, they'll be around.
Hey ladies, do you know who this is? The man with
The only thing was asked if he had anything to drink today and he said no.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the only FST question.
So, are you hearing this? Nope. This guy is diabetic. Yeah, I know. I heard. It's probably not a deuce. It's probably a diabetic issue.
Let's see.
He's saying that he didn't see lights. He didn't know we were trying to stop him. He thought there was something wrong with the car. So we'll do the whole FST, investigation thing.
Get blood taken.
I talked to Mom. She said he's type 1 diabetic. When I told her he was in a crash, she said, "Oh no, he's a diabetic, and we might have
Yeah, and it could very well be. I heard the number.
Yeah.
These guys told me the number. I heard the gal. So it absolutely.
Instead, he repeatedly asked about his 6-year-old daughter, calling her the most important person in his life. Officers informed him that she had been transported to the hospital by ambulance but appeared to be unharmed. Learning that she was likely safe provided one of the first moments of relief during an otherwise chaotic encounter. As the investigation continued, officers began exchanging information among themselves. One officer explained that after speaking with the child's mother, they had learned Callahan was a type 1 diabetic who wore a continuous glucose monitor on his arm. According to the information provided, the device had failed to alert him that his blood sugar had dropped to dangerously low levels before he lost awareness.
The other thing is he's not supposed to have a daughter right now. There's a court order for child custody arrangement, and he's violated that.
The officers also acknowledged that many of the behaviors they had observed, including his delayed responses, apparent confusion, failure to acknowledge emergency lights, and inability to follow commands, were entirely consistent with a severe diabetic episode. Callahan himself explained that he never intentionally ignored the police. He said he never saw the emergency lights, never heard the sirens, and believed there was simply something wrong with his truck. From his perspective, he had no idea officers were attempting to stop him. As additional officers arrived, conversations at the scene increasingly reflected the growing realization that this might not have been a criminal investigation at all. Several officers openly discussed that the objective signs they were seeing pointed toward a diabetic emergency rather than intoxication. They acknowledged that everything they had learned, from the mother's statements to Callahan's medical history and the malfunctioning glucose monitor, supported that conclusion. Nevertheless, despite recognizing that the evidence increasingly suggested a medical crisis instead of criminal behavior, the investigation did not end there. Officers continued discussing possible criminal violations, including driving under the influence and potential child custody issues. Those discussions would eventually become a major focus of the legal controversy that followed. What had begun as a suspected drunk driving stop was rapidly transforming into a far more complicated case. It would eventually raise difficult questions about police use of force, medical emergencies, and whether officers should have recognized the signs of a life-threatening diabetic episode before treating Jeffrey Callahan as a criminal suspect.
So, and the other thing is, diabetic fits like that.
Yeah.
Everyone I've been in, they're short-lived before the blackout.
Which, when you said he was unresponsive when you pulled him over,
Yeah.
you weren't getting anything
So
from
that could have happened, but the travel from downtown to here, the highest rate of about 30 miles an hour, most were between 20 and 30. That's an awful long time, because the diabetic episode can be induced because of the alcohol you ingested.
So you did the Miranda thing. Find out about the. Is he coherent?
Oh, yeah.
You're able to talk to him.
And the dad in me hopes it's diabetic.
Yeah.
Seriously. I don't want to think about that poor, beautiful little girl having to live with that. So,
Start working.
so is mom on her way?
She's headed to the hospital to do the
Okay, good. So, if that gets extended at all, just get a hold of Sarge at Sonoma County just to let him know what's up.
Yeah. He was aware. I gave him the phone number for the mom so that his deputy can.
Oh, good. Oh, okay. Oh, you got to hold him before he
There's
takes
a
off.
deputy over there waiting with the daughter.
Yes. No, I know that.
The sergeant. Yes.
That's what I
talked
said.
with their sergeant.
So you got Sarge, you got that?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So work the DUI,
work the
and
dues.
foul engagement, and the pursuit, and all that aspect. But see if we can do FSTs with them.
Okay.
They're going to probably want to take him to the hospital.
No, they released him
okay
to
with
us.
releasing him?
Yeah,
Okay.
but I figured we were going to take him anyways.
He won't be able to go to jail until he's medically cleared.
Yeah.
So if it goes that route, we'll take him to jail.
As the body camera footage came to an end, the focus of the case shifted from what happened on the roadside to whether the officer's actions complied with the United States Constitution. The central legal question was not whether Jeffrey Callahan was experiencing a medical emergency. Instead, it was whether the force used against him was reasonable based on what officers knew at the time. In the United States, police use of force is governed by the Fourth Amendment, which protects individuals against unreasonable searches and seizures. When courts evaluate whether an officer's use of force was lawful, they do not judge the decision with the benefit of hindsight. Instead, they examine the circumstances exactly as they appeared to the officer during the encounter. The United States Supreme Court established this standard in the landmark 1989 case of Graham versus Connor. Under that decision, courts evaluate three primary factors. They consider the seriousness of the suspected crime, whether the individual posed an immediate threat to officers or the public, and whether the individual was actively resisting or attempting to flee. Applying that legal framework to this incident, a court could reasonably conclude that Officer Forrest Whitall's initial approach with his firearm drawn was justified. At that moment, dispatch had reported an erratic driver who appeared to be intoxicated. The driver had failed to stop after emergency lights were activated, continued driving for several minutes, and ultimately crashed into a ditch. From the officer's perspective, those facts were sufficient to justify treating the encounter as potentially dangerous. However, the legal analysis becomes much more complicated once the repeated Taser deployments are examined. The narrator points to the 2010 Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision in Bryan versus McPherson, a case that established important limits on Taser use. The court ruled that a Taser is not considered a minor level of force. Instead, it represents an intermediate and significant use of force that requires a strong governmental interest before it can be justified. In that case, the court determined that using a Taser against an unarmed individual who was not attempting to flee, was not threatening officers, and was only passively failing to comply with commands constituted excessive force. According to the narrator, many of those same circumstances were present during Jeffrey Callahan's encounter. By the time Officer Whitall repeatedly deployed his Taser, Callahan had raised his hands, made no aggressive movements, displayed no weapon, and made no attempt to escape. Although he failed to follow commands, his behavior was equally consistent with someone suffering from a severe medical emergency. The narrator explains that officers were faced with two possible explanations. One was intoxication, the other was a medical crisis. Both possibilities fit the facts that were available at the scene. Callahan had been driving slowly rather than aggressively. He appeared confused rather than combative. After the crash, he seemed dazed, slow to respond, and incapable of understanding what officers were telling him to do. Those observations could easily describe someone experiencing severe hypoglycemia just as readily as someone under the influence of alcohol. Because of those circumstances, the narrator concludes that a court would likely find the repeated Taser deployments unreasonable, particularly the second and third uses of the Taser after Callahan had already fallen to the ground and no longer presented any obvious threat. The legal concerns did not end there. Following the incident, Jeffrey Callahan filed a federal civil rights lawsuit alleging that officers used additional force that was not fully visible on the body camera footage. According to the complaint, Officer Whitall forced Callahan's face into the pavement while a Sonoma County Sheriff's sergeant knelt on his shoulder and pulled his right arm behind his back with enough force to fracture it. Although those allegations had not been proven simply by reviewing the body camera footage, the narrator explains that if a court determined those events occurred as alleged, they would likely constitute additional violations of the Fourth Amendment because they involved force beyond what was reasonably necessary under the circumstances. Ultimately, this portion of the case highlights one of the most difficult responsibilities facing law enforcement officers. Police officers are often required to make life-changing decisions within seconds, using only the information available at the scene. However, once evidence begins pointing toward a medical emergency instead of criminal behavior, the law expects officers to adjust their response accordingly. Whether that happened in Jeffrey Callahan's case would ultimately become one of the central questions in the legal proceedings that followed. As the investigation continued, the body camera footage revealed something that would later become one of the most controversial aspects of the entire case. Even though officers were increasingly recognizing that Jeffrey Callahan was likely suffering from a serious diabetic emergency, they continued discussing whether criminal charges could still be pursued. One issue quickly became the center of those conversations. Sergeant Fensky repeatedly stated that Callahan was not supposed to have his 6-year-old daughter with him that day because of a court-ordered custody arrangement. Based on the information available to him at the time, the sergeant believed that simply having the child in his custody might constitute another criminal offense, in addition to the suspected driving violations. However, the facts that later emerged painted a much different picture. According to Jeffrey Callahan's federal civil rights complaint, Sergeant Fensky contacted the child's mother by telephone while officers remained at the scene. During that conversation, she reportedly explained that although the official custody order granted Callahan weekend visitation, she regularly allowed him to spend additional time with their daughter whenever he asked. More importantly, she stated that she had personally given him permission to have their daughter with him on the day of the incident. If that account was accurate, it significantly changed the legal significance of the custody issue. The narrator explains that child custody disputes are generally handled in civil court rather than through criminal prosecution. Simply deviating from a visitation schedule does not automatically constitute a crime. Criminal liability exists only under very limited circumstances. Under Section 278.5 of the California Penal Code, a parent commits a criminal offense only when they take, keep, withhold, or conceal a child with the malicious intent of depriving the lawful custodian of custody or visitation rights. The narrator emphasizes that the requirement of malicious intent is what makes the statute so important. The law was created to address deliberate deliberate parental abductions and intentional custodial interference, not ordinary disagreements or informal changes to visitation schedules that occur with the consent of both parents. Assuming the conversation with the child's mother occurred exactly as described in the lawsuit, the narrator concludes that it would be highly unlikely for a court to determine that Jeffrey Callahan had violated California's custodial interference statute. The mother's reported permission would substantially undermine any claim that Callahan acted with the malicious intent required by law. Although the available body camera footage ended while officers were still at the scene, the legal story was far from over. Court records, official documents, and the federal lawsuit filed by Jeffrey Callahan provided a much clearer picture of what happened after the cameras stopped recording. Despite multiple officers acknowledging that Callahan was most likely experiencing a severe hypoglycemic episode, Officer Forrest Whitehall continued treating the incident as a criminal investigation. Rather than ending the investigation after recognizing the signs of a medical emergency, the officer proceeded with a DUI investigation. At the scene, he administered a horizontal gaze nystagmus, or HGN, test, which is commonly used by law enforcement as one of several standardized field sobriety tests to look for possible signs of alcohol impairment. According to Officer Whitehall's arrest report, the test indicated a lack of smooth pursuit and the onset of nystagmus before 45 degrees, observations that he believed were consistent with intoxication. However, Jeffrey Callahan's federal complaint challenged those findings. The lawsuit alleged that the body camera footage of the examination did not actually show the indicators described in the arrest report, raising serious questions about whether the results had been accurately documented. Following the roadside investigation, officers transported Callahan to a local hospital for additional testing. Once at the hospital, he voluntarily agreed to provide a preliminary breath sample to determine whether alcohol was present in his system. The result was unmistakable. His breath alcohol concentration measured 0.00%, indicating that no alcohol was detected. Callahan also consented to a blood draw for a more comprehensive toxicology analysis. When the laboratory results were completed, they reportedly showed no intoxicating substances whatsoever in his bloodstream. Medical staff also examined the injuries he had sustained during the arrest. His injured arm was x-rayed before being placed into a cast and supported with a sling. Despite those medical findings, Callahan remained handcuffed to his hospital bed for nearly 5 hours before eventually being released from medical care. Even after the hospital confirmed there was no evidence of alcohol or drug impairment, the criminal case continued. Later that evening, Officer Whitehall booked Jeffrey Callahan into the Sonoma County Jail on suspicion of felony vehicular evading, felony child endangerment, and resisting arrest. According to the federal complaint, Officer Whitehall also asked the Sonoma County District Attorney to consider filing a DUI charge once the blood test results became available. The lawsuit further alleged that Sergeant Fensky submitted a suspected child abuse report to Sonoma County Child Protective Services, identifying Jeffrey Callahan as the alleged abuser and his daughter as the alleged victim. As the criminal investigation progressed, prosecutors reviewed all of the available evidence, including the medical records, toxicology results, and investigative reports. On February 10, 2025, the Sonoma County District Attorney reached a final decision. After reviewing the evidence, prosecutors declined to file any criminal charges against Jeffrey Callahan. Several months later, the legal battle entered an entirely different courtroom. On July 14, 2025, exactly 1 year after the incident, Jeffrey Callahan and his daughter filed a federal civil rights lawsuit in the United States District Court for the Northern District of California. The lawsuit named the city of Sebastopol, Officer Forrest Whitehall, Sergeant Fensky, and Captain James Hickey as defendants. The complaint alleged numerous constitutional violations, including excessive force, unlawful detention, false arrest, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. By the time the lawsuit was filed, significant changes had already occurred within the police department. Officer Whitehall had left the Sebastopol Police Department and accepted a position with the Petaluma Police Department, while Captain James Hickey had retired from law enforcement. Nearly 2 years after the incident, the case finally reached its conclusion. In early July 2026, the city of Sebastopol announced that it had agreed to resolve the lawsuit through a $1.95 million settlement. In its official announcement, the city emphasized that the settlement did not constitute an admission of liability. Instead, it represented a negotiated resolution intended to bring the litigation to an end without a trial. Even though the settlement closed the civil case, it also marked the conclusion of an incident that began with what officers believed was a routine DUI investigation, but ultimately evolved into one of the most closely scrutinized police encounters involving a medical emergency. The outcome highlighted how quickly a life-threatening health crisis can be mistaken for criminal behavior, and how those decisions can ultimately be examined in both federal court and the court of public opinion.